Hi, everyone. Hi, everyone. Welcome back. It's Tankie Group Therapy. I don't have any of my requisite recording equipment, so I have no idea how I sound. Uh, Tell me how I sound, guys. I should have done this before I press record. I'm sure I sound
You're
fine.
fine.
Okay, that's
You
good.
sound fine, Sina.
Woohoo! So we are here. It is a historically evil time in the history of our species. How do we feel about this, folks? Like this is, I mean, there's no other way to say this. We live in a planet like reigned over by evil, and that evil. I'm 40 seconds in, and I'm launching. I'm launching to the moon here, folks, because there's like nothing to say. Okay, I should introduce everyone. Hi, everyone. It's me, Sina, Nora, Alex, Jay. Um, yeah, these obviously the hunger crisis, the hunger war, the starvation war aspect of the genocide, because of course this genocide is like multi-pronged, um, has really kicked in, and the evidence of that is in all of our social feeds. And we've reached, starving babies. I mean, it's been like that for a while, but in very very high numbers every day, growing by the day. So we're gonna have to talk about that, guys. We're gonna have to talk about that. Check in how everyone's doing. Um, I'm gonna kick it over to Nora because Nora's the secret host of this episode. Because as usual, my internet may crap out, and so you guys have to keep going without me. Keep going. Come back for my corpse later. Uh, how are you doing, Nora? Secret host of this episode.
Oh God. I'm doing bad. Bad. Uh yeah, I mean just the level of um just the most disgusting images again, as always, through 22 months of this genocide. I just remember like us talking about, certain images or videos that were coming out, October, November, December 2023, and seeing things that we'd never seen before. I just remember like the man who was crushed underneath an Israeli tank, and we all were here talking about how that just that one image, for example, like altered our brain chemistry, altered our genetic code, changed something irreparably within us, and now we're looking at just a stream of toddlers and infants, just skeletal and with their bellies, in their skin colors I've never seen in human beings' skin before. And I think those of us who are parents who are around children um, have like a I don't know. There's something visceral that happens, you know, because when you have your baby, eh, you're absolutely 100% 24 hours a day consumed with monitoring them and seeing how they grow and like marveling at their little skin folds, and their cheeks and their thighs, and just how like chubby and you know fluffy and delicious your baby is. And you're constantly making sure, as a mom, as someone who was lucky enough to be able to breastfeed my kids, um, constantly figuring out, how to increase milk supply, and, working with lactation consultants and friends and family and people coming over and having really, you know, um, like wonderful advice about, different tea that you can drink. And, I remember eating like I've never eaten before, like just consuming a ridiculous amount of calories myself because I was hungry, because I was feeding my baby. And to be able to do that and watch your baby grow and change smile and laugh and do all the things. And, anything that goes wrong, the baby has a cold, or the baby, is spitting up or something. And, you rush to the doctor, you like call your nurse friend, and, is everything okay? Just consumed um, by every little minute detail that only you really notice in your baby, right? And then to see these images of mothers just abs and fathers just beside themselves with this look in their eye of just complete helplessness, where mothers aren't able to breastfeed their children because they're malnourished, or they have, um, you know, waterborne diseases, and the water isn't clean, and just the basic like necessities to sustain life are all being ripped away from people. And to have to watch your precious infant struggle and die in your arms because you can't feed them, because Israel is preventing you from doing this. I don't know. I think that's something that kind of just compounds the terror, of all of us having to watch this and not be able to do anything but the things that we're doing. We're like sending all of our money that we can to places like the Samir Project and other mutual aid organizations, or individual families that we know and care about in Gaza, because that's what we can do. But to know that this is not just a policy that Israel is carrying out, but that it is now become normalized, and that this is now a policy that will be repeated, because it is being done and encouraged and sustained by the West. Something in me has once again broken on a very deep level. Um, I was I came across this kind of secondhand story. I feel bad about even talking about it here because I haven't verified it yet. But there was someone who said that a medical professional, a doctor in Gaza, was telling them that, um, you know, for Palestinians, suicide is haram. It's forbidden. It's not. It's not something that people of faith, um, consider carrying out, even in times of like great distress. So kids, these children, are now, who have lost everything and are starving, are going to the U.S. Israeli mercenary sites, um, you know, to be killed. These basically like suicide by cop, which we've heard of in this country a lot, for a long time. Um, just that, knowing these things that we can't unknow. Um, I I don't know, and so, just I don't even want to like mention it, but now this like sudden, like a memo went out to all of these like fucking Western leaders, and now they're saying, oh, this is unconscionable, and all of these statements about how Israel must not, do this, and they must let food in. But they're, these are this, like, I'm, thinking about Keir Starmer, for example, who, on October 9th or whatever, 2023, was like, yeah, Israel has a right to withhold food and water from Palestinians. And now he's saying, oh, this is bad, after 22 months of starvation and genocide and just mass slaughter. Um, I think it's just to save face, but it's more than too late. Um, he is implicated. They're all implicated. They're all responsible for this, and nothing's happening, right? So like the crossings are still closed. There are thousands of trucks of aid waiting just a few kilometers away from these starving mothers and their starving babies. Um, and millions of people all over the world who are uh, watching this, and in the region. I mean, why isn't there a mass mobilization to rush the gates? Why is there only one boat coming, in the Freedom Flotilla? Why is there only one? Why isn't there 1,000? Why isn't there 10,000? Why aren't we all getting on boats to stop this? I don't know. Yeah, I mean, like these days I'm like wishing for an asteroid just to come and end it. Um, end it for all. We don't deserve this world. We don't deserve it. We have let this happen, and no one can. No one. It seems like no one has the will or the capacity to stop it, except for Yemen, and Iran last month, and Lebanon in the capacity that Hezbollah still has, and of course the resistance in Gaza. The resistance in Gaza is the thing that is I think, keeping all of us from going completely insane. And their steadfastness and their tenacity and their ingenuity. I think, Lara was talking last time, a couple weeks ago, about patience, about the time scale of like, how resistance operates on a different clock. We're like playing the long game here, and that is something that I have to keep kind of remembering over and over again in my head, that this is a long walk. We are in this for the long haul. And Alex, what you said a couple weeks ago too about how defeating colonialism is the easy part, and then figuring out how to live in a world where this has happened, and also for Palestinians how to rebuild and reimagine their own future. That's the hard part. And so, yeah, it's I don't know, I'm kind of swimming in a sea of different perspectives and trying to keep the long view, trying to remain attached to this. It's not just a belief, because belief implies that it can be kind of an opinion. The knowledge that Israel will be defeated, but just I'm having a hard time. I'm struggling with the time it's taking for that to happen.
It's always difficult to go after Nora. Yeah, I think. So I'm just thinking of the story you told about the kids, Nora. Yeah, the thing about the memo going out, and like all of a sudden these world leaders and shit libs and people who've spent 2 years denying or obfuscating what's happening and what we knew was going to happen is maddening. It's also maddening that they want us to not treat them in a certain way now that they've achieved some level of recognition, right? So like we're not supposed to yell at them, be mean to them on the internet. We're not supposed to go after Maddie Iglesias, right? Fuck that guy anyway. But that's maddening. What's maddening though, but I think it also offers an opportunity for us to push them then and say, look, okay, you're admitting that there's mass starvation going. It took overwhelming evidence of the most inhumane shit that we have seen for you to finally say, you know what, we might have been wrong, And they're still putting all sorts of qualifiers. Like most of these people are not saying that there's a genocide going on, because if someone like Keir Starmer or Trump says there's a genocide going on, they're implicating themselves, right? So they can't say that. Fine, but these shit libs that like, and I'm not talking about normal people. Like that's the kind of stuff that on the ground we're supposed to do, right? If you're involved in organizing or consciousness raising, like we're supposed to meet people where they're at, right? And then to try to like offer what we can to help them push them to a certain level of awareness. I'm not talking about them. I'm talking about people who are like influential in like media spheres and politicians. So fine, you're against mass starvation now, but it's not enough. It's not enough. You have to go beyond that. Will you go beyond that? Will you go to the point that you will recognize that Gaza is our current manifestation of no pasarán? Like this is the Spanish Civil War moment, like where the way power works and the way that power is divided is clearly illustrated, devoid of ideological or legitimating masks. So are you shit libs willing to go beyond to say we're against mass starvation and let's open and let's do some sort of stupid, you can imagine what kind of ideas they have for getting food in. But are you willing to go beyond that to say that this is the central contradiction of our time? Are you willing to go beyond that to say Palestinians have a legitimate right to liberation beyond self-defense? I mean, all this stuff is encoded already in international law. Are you willing to go and say, listen, what actually will end this is Palestinian liberation? And you don't get to mischaracterize or judge or critique how Palestinians are going to achieve national liberation on their own. Are you willing to just adopt and support the idea that Palestinians support national liberation? And if you're not, then you're a colonizer, you're a racist, you're on the wrong side of history. You're that gif where the Nazis saying, "Are we the baddies?" Because that's one of the things that I've learned in 2 years. And I should have known. And I've said it before. I think despite whatever historical knowledge or experience I have, I was still like super naive. This is the no pasarán of our time, because a free Palestine it will knock down other structures of domination in the region and beyond, right? Like I feel like so many of the contradictions and the methods of domination, ideological, political, technological, are embodied in how these people are subjected to slow and intensified genocide today, past and present. So I understand on a certain level why a free Palestine is threatening to an entire global order. But I think this is where we have to push people who are now in the last couple of days saying, oh my God, there's mass starvation, after they spent 2 years denying it. We're actively working to prevent their governments and folks in their countries from achieving that realization. Like I think about what the students in the US suffered more than a year ago. I mean, like when they were right all along. So the people who attacked them, are they willing to go out and come out and say, you guys were right? We will reinstate you. We will give you your degree. No, they're not. Colombia is still suspending students for going to some sort of workshop. That's right. I'm really, that's the type of rage that I'm feeling. Like I want to yell at a lot of people and to see, and to push them to see if they're actually willing to engage what this is about, beyond just to say, oh no, I've seen pictures come out of Gaza. Things are really terrible there. Because this is, I can't envision a world that just allows this to happen and nothing happens to the people who waged this genocide. Like I think a lot about Justin telling us about the story he was writing and how in his utopia, we win, the Palestinians win. And then there's like, fuck Nuremberg. There is no Nuremberg. It's actually Hodeidah. And like to see they actually engage in justice for all these genociders and people who were complicit in allowing and furthering genocide. I would love to send Brett Stevens first. I think he'd be first in line after that op-ed he published last week. It's also just every morning, like I've met most of you through Twitter, right? Like I think most of us somehow allowed us to connect via this hell site. And especially during the pandemic, I had a lot of fun logging on and just talking shit and seeing the craziness and the madness that people were posting. it's a and this I don't say that I don't know how to say this without sounding like just like an asshole, but there is every morning logging on and to see requests from families in Palestine saying, "Can you just please quote my chuffed link or my PayPal link?" Um, and I see, our little circle, right? Like I see all of us are doing this, so I imagine that all of us are receiving these requests, and we have been receiving these requests for a while. Um, it's heartbreaking. It's heartbreaking, and it's when you combine it with like the story that Nora told us, and as a parent, you feeling a certain way about being able to provide your kids with like a decent meal, right? Like thinking about this, like not taking it for granted. Um, it's just so fucked. It's I just can't. I don't. It's just I'm all over the place. And then and then you see things like that Palestinian Contra leader in Rafah, like posting an op-ed, publishing an op-ed in the Wall Street Journal, right? Like where it's just too much. It's too much. We're under the rule of a mad king who today said that he stopped the genocide in Rwanda, um, blasting musical music out of his golf cart as he's riding around in Scotland. Like it's I think Sina, you've made this point over and over again about how like the human mind is not able to like process all the shit that we get through social media. Like it's too much information. Like it's too fast. It's too much. And I feel like just spinning, right? Especially now that I'm in summer, right? I'm not teaching, so that forces me to be a little disciplined in a certain way. But now where I have a little bit of time to just kind of follow, just to waste more time on these social media platforms. I think Sina's right. I've come to that realization. Sina, for once, I have said that you are correct. This is my first time that I've said that you are right. But in the era, but again, I think all these contradictions, all these in the era of the Mad King, in the era of Children of Men Democrats, in the era of genocide enablers and people who contributed to making this possible, whether materially, politically, or ideologically, the lines are clearly drawn. And it should be the people who are finally realizing what is happening. It's time to go beyond that. It's time to go beyond that because I still fundamentally agree that with people like Gustavo Petro and others who have said like this shit is going to come back. It is coming back, right, to the so-called West. We've seen this happen already. But primarily, this is about ending this anachronistic situation and relationship that exists in West Asia and fighting for and pushing for and advocating the freedom and liberation of Palestinians after decades, or a century, more than a century of domination and subjection. It's time. There's no way that this holdover should still be existing in this particular manner. So if you really understand that there's a genocide and mass starvation campaign going, then we have to go beyond that to obviously demand that the gates and the borders are brought down and food goes down immediately. And even then, it's a complicated situation, right? From experts who say like you actually can't feed people who haven't eaten for days right away. That's going to kill them. That goes without saying. This is what we need, not airdrops that are killing Palestinians or injuring Palestinians and producing this gross spectacle. Bring down the borders. Get rid of these psychopaths, Israeli psychopaths who are blocking aid trucks from going in. If they wanted to, they could. But beyond that, like nothing can be the same after this. It can't be. And that's what I'm just thinking about. This is the no pasaran of our time. And what are we going to do? And obviously, but the immediate first task again is to end this. To end this and to feed and to take care and to protect and to save the people of Gaza.
Well, I have to go after both of you, so thank you both very much. I will say, I think for me, so earlier this week, I mean, I did this live stream with Hala Sabah from the Samir Project, and the reason that I did it was kind of exactly what both of you were talking about, Nora and Alex, which is like I logged on Monday morning, and look, I get I've gotten requests since October of 2023 to share people's like chuffs or GoFundMe's. That's not something new. And how I've related to that over time has kind of evolved. Like I used to share kind of a couple and say, okay, these are just the ones I'm going to do. And then I'm going to share Samir project and just kind of just direct more people there because at least it's a more organized and larger effort that I know is helping multiple people who are vulnerable in all of this. But you start to look at the people who are requesting and you start to see the way that their bodies have changed since they started requesting from you, right? And you start to you read their stories, right? I mean, um, of just the pain. I mean, the baby thing is just wild, and you see their babies just as these really emaciated babies. But in addition to that, there's also just stories of parents who are like, imagine you're trying to go to sleep at night and you haven't been able to feed your kids anything all day long and they're starving, right? And this is not, I mean, I think Hala was helpful too because she's like, look, we've been talking about this for months. Like people weren't believing us, right? Or they didn't take it seriously for what it is. But it's a process of attrition, right? Like it's one thing not to eat for one day. It's another thing to eat, a few meals a week, but imagine doing that for months on end, right? And imagine like you just don't know when your next meal is going to come from and you haven't had meat, right? In 8 months or whatever, right? Because the meat hasn't been getting in forever, hasn't been allowed in, right? And so you're talking about people who are subsisting on occasional flour, like occasional ability to like make a little bit of bread. They're mixing salt into water, like, just, horrible conditions that to imagine. And so you imagine, like, you're trying to go to bed at night, you're starving, but your kids are starving, and they're like, "Dad or mom, like, why" "Give me something. Like, can't I have something?" And so that just really broke me, like Nora was saying again, and then I get mad at myself because I'm like, why did this not break months ago? Like something, like I was aware of this, but clearly I wasn't able to fully comprehend what this would mean until I start seeing some of these pictures, seeing these stories, and then seeing how many people are sharing the same stories and they're all in my inbox, right? And so then I did the Samir project thing because I was like, look, I need to bring in somebody who is talking to people on the ground all the time. Her team's on the ground. Like she knows what's going on in all aspects of Gaza, can get contextualize this. Um, and that's great. And then people should absolutely support the Samir project. But also with that, there's like this just realization that she has because of the work that she does that like supporting them is just not enough, right? That they're not things that people can buy. Like it's a kind of it is this extreme sick version of Hunger Games mixed with Squid Games where like you're just people clamoring to get a few $100s so that they can go buy something that should cost like $5, and then, so it's all of the worst stuff. So there's that. Um, the other part that you mentioned, Alex, and Brett, I did a thing, shout out to Adnan. I was on the second struggle session that they had, I think last week. And we had Brett from Rev Left Radio on, who was another person I really love. And, he was just like, look, he's like, we have to make lists of these people and they have to know that they'll be hunted for the rest of their life, and like that I think is something it's interesting on terms of like what will liberals, like, I mean, because under, as you said, Alex, like under sort of basic normie international law and whatnot, like these people absolutely deserve justice, right? And so, like, how involved can you get them into, um, just these projects that are starting to go after like war crime, tribunals or whatever? I mean, obviously, they're not going to become, the vampire hunter of these folks or whatever, but I think that's, like, kind of an interesting thing, but it's weird because you get into that and then you're like, we're sort of fantasizing, right, about a future and, like, accountability that will come down the line because we feel so unable to do anything right now that really can change what's going on, right? And so then we just get into this phase of like, okay, if I can't do something now, then I'm gonna like kind of fantasize about the revenge in the future. And I don't know. I mean, I think there is something to Nora's question about why aren't there more flotillas? Like, why aren't there a million convoys by land? Why don't we have solidarity brigades of the kind that like the Sandinistas had, where people would be coming from the US to bring them stuff? Like, I understand on like some many of those reasons, right? I can rationalize it. I can say, well, surveillance state is what it is now. 9/11 changed the way airports work, like all these kinds of things. I can kind of go there, but it doesn't really fully explain it because it's just that we just don't have the level of civil disobedience on a scale really anywhere that there should be, except Yemen, right? Where like people will come together every Friday by like a million people, and they'll fire a rocket right into Israel or whatever. Like, so there are some, but it is like so small in comparison to what it should be. Um, and Yeah, I don't know on that point, like, where that leaves me. I do end up in the asteroid space with Nora at points of, like, we haven't done enough to deserve, and I think this was actually the last thing that I kinda wanted to say, which was I actually went back and I didn't rewatch the whole movie because I'm sure it's terrible in a lot of ways. But Schindler's List, there's that scene at the end where he's like, I could have sold this car and saved 10 more. I could have sold this ring or this watch or whatever. Like he's like he's apologizing to the 1100 Jews that he's saved from extermination camps or whatever, that like he could have saved more people. And I'm sitting there and I'm watching it and I'm like, we won't even be able to say that we did anything like that when this is over. Like, who's going to be able to say that they saved 1,100 people, And, but I think that that feeling that he's expressing in that moment, Liam Neeson's character in the film, is something that I. I just fear that we will all feel just racked with guilt at what we didn't do, and deservedly so, right? Like, we deserve all of that guilt. We shouldn't be absolved for it. Um, I think it was Assad in the chat who said when somebody requested another Tankie group therapy, like they know that Tankie group therapy can't stop the starvation, right? Right. And I think that's one of the frustrating things I think for all of us that are in like the media space and all of that, is that on some level I do think there's something we help people do in terms of like getting through their day and, you know, feeling like they're not crazy for feeling all the things that we all feel. But it is not, we have not done our job in terms of actually really helping people to mobilize and organize in the ways that are necessary. And I don't know how we get there, but that's something that I'm really interested in continuing to like think through with folks like you all and others, is like, how do we move this media work to something that is like more connected to struggles also in the places that we are. And I'm not saying that folks are not doing that, but I think it just needs to be better, just like all the organizing needs to be better and all of that stuff. So that's all I'll say.
That was really good. I I was kind of wrestling with this when Nora said it, and then when you followed up with it about like fantasizing about the asteroid, because that's it, it's not nihilism, okay? It's not nihilism. Nihilism is what most of our society has become, at least in the sense of neoliberalism was designed to create a an interlocking web of industrial process zones and urban consumer metropoles, fed by a vast machinery of resource wealth extraction, protected by like an infinite number of drones and military tech and whatever, right? Like that's the symphony that they planned. And in some ways, the sum total of that there was this ideological component to it. Now, in English, ideology, using the word ideology, especially in our context of being communists, it sounds a bit, I don't know, it sounds a bit old fashioned because it's not, it feels like a 19th century word because now it's not like we're talking the depths of the infiltration of our brains and our souls, which is to say, through words and images and culture and whatever, is so much more profound than some 19th century or early 20th century newspaper mogul or oil baron could have ever fathomed. Because and partly because the population of the world is so much bigger than it was in the 19th and early 20th century, and now the stakes of us rising up in big numbers are so much higher, that they are so numerically outmatched, and yet they have to work so hard to convince us that it's hopeless to resist them. And so in some ways, Gaza is the test. Gaza is the litmus test, stress test. I don't know. It's how do you like make a metaphor out of a Holocaust? It's not, there's something like wrong to it, but I'm going to do it anyways. But it's like it's the historical stress test that they're subjecting everyone on the planet to, and saying, watch. We're gonna take our little magnifying glass and we're gonna go into this beautiful place, and then we're gonna fry some ants, and you're gonna watch us, and you're gonna watch us laugh, and we're gonna laugh, and everybody on our side is gonna laugh with us, and then we're gonna cry, we're gonna pretend to call you racist when you say stop doing that, and like that. And then meanwhile, we're gonna have this entire farce orchestrated with the help of, not joking, tens of thousands of professional media workers working across the globe in mostly like a specific number of languages, but big ones, and in various different environments spread out across the world to either obfuscate or directly lie about the crimes of this entity and its backers. And that's what they are making us watch, what they are saying watch us, watch as we do this, and watch in the same breath that we're going to still cry out about the arrest of some rando in some country in XYZ, and they're going to continue the liberal farce that they're lighting on fire in Gaza, right? That they've always lit on fire. They've always laughed about it, that like the ordering of the world to them is clear, that they are on top and everybody underneath them can be destroyed at the push of the button if it's deemed necessary. I think the part of me that disagrees with the asteroid thing is that, which is not nihilism, I will say, it's a divine punishment, retribution, I guess eschatological, maybe a little bit, like shades of it, I don't know. But in the sense that like there is like this divine justice, something bigger than all of us. And I want to say that there's a temptation to really sort of like etherealize it, whereas in reality we don't need to. The justice is there, it's secular. It's happening every day on the battlefield. That even in Khan Yunis, which they have nuked effectively, they are still getting toasted like popcorn in their little stupid tanks. Okay, this is the lesson, the object lesson. As much as they squeeze Gaza, as much as evil they practice, the people they don't leave. They refuse to leave where they're staying, and their neighbors too. And in doing so, they create a safety barrier around themselves, because if more of them did it, then they would be easier to target the ones who stay. So there is something amazing happening in the core of humanity, and in a lot of ways, and we've said this a lot, that Gaza is defending our species. Gaza is defending the souls of our humanity. The very definition of the human is being tested. Are you a rat, fucking evil Zionist pig, or are you a beautiful Palestinian hero who stands on top of the rubble, runs with a homemade explosive device in track pants and flip-flops into the battlefield of his homeland and drops it into the opening hatch of a tank, and like hears them scream and runs backwards? Can you imagine like the joy that man feels at that time? So like this is peak humanity, what that guy just did. He faced down the most violent genocidal machine that exists today, which is a conglomeration of all the prior evil ones and all of their resources, and into that. And so the idea that this is something that like our earth is not worth saving is something that I want to resist personally, but like obviously I understand the sentiment of like we need divine justice, and at this point it will only come in the form of some, accidental calamity or some cosmic calamity in this case or whatever, like bring on the pestilence, okay? But it's more that no, like our earth is fine, like humans are good. We are good people, and the good people of the world are watching this and mortified. It's just our leaders and the systems that we are constrained in that force us to live like this, that force our obsequience to all of these crimes, that just say, okay, here's your fucking Minions movie, you disgusting pig. Go and eat your slop. Go and get your fucking Minecraft and go and eat your slop and eat it. And don't complain about the taste. Okay? And that's all we want from you. And like what we are witnessing now is the payoff of, I would say, like 40 years of sort of American imperialist policy, maybe a bit more. Like, when do you put the neocons? The 80s, maybe late 70s, 80s? But like this trajectory that the US empire has been on for a while, maybe you can say it's the clean break paper, maybe it's all these things combined, because the Arab states were all neutralized basically by 79 or whatever, right? When Egypt crumbled into its current lobotomized state. Like it was over for them, that resistance. They had no fear of, and the first Palestinian Intifada was a surprise to them, sure, but the way that, especially that it concluded with Oslo, that I would say that the imperialists found themselves on a plan. They accelerated it, and they needed the resources of the big oil states, and so they made their move: Afghanistan, Iraq, Libya, and who knows, and maybe Iran is around the corner next. But at the end of the day, they still don't, even with all these, let's say, victories, even with the downfall of Syria into this nightmare scenario that we're all, that we're all terrified watching, that even then they can't extract even the baseline desired goals. They can't achieve even liberating Khan Yunis. Like, they destroyed Syria. They threw the kitchen sink at this beautiful, wonderful country. They killed millions at this point, while killing and wounding and displacing millions, let's say. And even then, and even with their little jewel, Al-Qaeda boy, they still can't even get Khan Yunis decisively. They still can't even control Rafah, which was supposed to be controlled. So as much as the violence convinces us otherwise, their power has reached its limit. And in hitting that wall, we're seeing now what an evil fascist entity can do, which is smash as much as possible, poison as much as possible, kill, because killing is the only succor that they have to make themselves feel better. So I guess the question is, for me, is where do you balance that urge? Like, because at the one hand, you see all these terrible things and you feel such rage. You feel such rage, and you see how our societies are colluding together. You see the monsters all pretending not to care, all openly not caring and not pretending because they don't, and then starting to pretend to care all at once. So then where do you balance this? Like, how do we what is this schizophrenic world we live now, where unlike a lot of the people around us, we choose to look at this and we like make this our lives. Unlike most of our society, which I think actively cultivates this ignorance and, you know, all the things that libs warned us of in that bullshit like Holocaust remembrance stuff, it turned out to be bullshit of like, oh, never forget, oh, we speak up, oh, when they came for the communists, I didn't say nothing, blah, blah, blah. They didn't mean it. It was all horseshit. It was all just like buzz so fucking dupes like fucking Spielberg could make and get like an Oscar and like do money laundering through their fucking foundation. Like, that's it. It's all hollow bullshit. They never meant it. The same way liberals, the scumbag, like white supremacist monsters, colonists who wrote all men are created equal, they put a big fucking star asterisk on it and they say, except them, and them, and them, and them, definitely not them. Like that's, and so this world order being laid out open for all of us forever is really a moment. And I've always felt this. I've said this from the beginning, that the goal of Al-Aqsa Flood was to provoke the worst elements of Zionist society and their backers to come forward, to take off the mask, to do everything that's detrimental to your project, both internally and externally, in the act of vengeance of squaring the circle and also getting like tempting them with Gaza, basically using, I'm not going to put it this way because this is not what they did, but in a sense, that they said, oh, come. You want a Palestine? You want 48 Palestine? Come for Gaza, at least. Come and take us in Gaza and see how it treats you. And in a lot of ways, we've watched this entity spread, like just frail. What's the word I'm looking for? Flail around as it isn't able to even achieve a modicum of victory, despite, and this is important, despite enjoying every advantage, every single advantage you could imagine they have, and they still can't take Khan Yunis. So I guess my question is like, how do we balance that? Because our listeners probably want to know.
Yeah. Sina, thank you for that. That's why this group, our chat, our YouTube sessions are so valuable, I think. Because that feeling of just end it. We can't, it's so much. And Palestinians, the nicest fucking people on earth, the funniest, the most brilliant, and this is happening to them. And it has been happening to them for over a century, and it just keeps happening. And, how just disgusting that they are suffering this. And so, that's where the asteroid comes in. And at the same time, as you said, Sina, the protection, the survival of our humanity is in the Palestinian resistance. The joy that one fighter obviously felt, being able to carry out that operation against these invading scum, in that fighter's full dignity and full, full legitimate rights to resist these occupiers, these invaders, these murderous, rapists, trying to take his land, his people's land. That joy, that kind of reflection of humanity, the kind of I wish that that libs could also feel that, could also, instead of just consuming the horror, could also allow themselves to support the resistance. That's something that, I'm like, why Why is it so hard? We know why it's hard for them, because they're racist scum. And they want all the benefits of, some sort of progressive politic without any sacrifice. But I feel bad for them that they aren't allowing themselves to also revel in the audacity of Palestinian humanity, and their incredible, tenacious fight for survival. And that thank you for that, Sina, because that pulled me immediately out of my pit, not of despair, but of grief and rage. And I think that's really important. And as much as, we all always talk about the Palestinian resistance and how normal it should be to support the indigenous resistance against Western settler colonialism, I think because of the weight and the amount of unbearable torture that we're seeing the torture, the whole-scale torture of 2 million people. And we haven't even talked about the West Bank, where, the settler scum are just, they're lynch mobs, going all over the West Bank. I think it is really, it is a very difficult task to hold those two things together. That, being able to hold the weight of all of that torture and subject ourselves, because we have to knowing to sharing the suffering in as much as we can with our own grief and our own rage, to also equally divide our attention and our heart and our spirits to the sacred audacity of the resistance, whether the Gaza resistance first and foremost, and then the resistance of Yemen, the resistance of Hezbollah, the resistance of Iran, the resistance of people who are materially putting a dent in Israel's extermination plans. And as you said, yeah, exactly. Like with all of the resources that Israel has, because it is a part of the imperial West, it's not able to achieve any of its war goals. Eliminate Hamas, subjugate the population, force them into different countries, abandon their national project. They're using the means of starvation and slaughter and trying to build these concentration camps. But we can't be resigned to Israel's plans. We can't just say, oh, it's over. All these people on social media are saying, like, well, what can I do? I'm not going to, I can't, there's no more food. That means we have, well, I'm not going to keep throwing my money at, at these mutual aid organizations. We can't give up. Why are people giving up on Gaza at this point? Giving up? I learned so much, especially in my 20s, from Chris Hedges, this incredible journalist, right? And he has always been this, he articulates this kind of rage and anger at the settler colonies. But I'm having a very hard time listening to him or reading anything by him lately, because it's not just his usual doom and gloom, which he's always been, but he is resigned. He's saying Gaza's finished, Gaza's done, there's nothing left, it's all gone. What
a sad, empty, just sad. It must be so
like
sad
he's not
to
even
be a
looking
liberal.
at the resistance.
It
He's
must
condescending.
be, oh
Yeah.
God, what an empty, boring. I can't even stand for that. Fuck off,
Yeah.
Chris Hedges.
Yeah, exactly. Right? And so we can't afford to do that right now, to say Gaza is done. That's it. that offers the liberal world order on a silver platter, and solidifies Israel's goals and the US's goals in all of this. We can't allow ourselves to listen to that shit.
There's so much race. I mean, some of this involves, as you mentioned, Nora, like so much racism, right? Like one of the supposedly foundational blocks of like universal enlightenment thought is, and it like supposedly forms a bedrock of the United States, right? Like a people's natural or innate right to rebellion against tyranny, except we know that there's like a color test, right? Like a racial test that only certain people are allowed to practice that natural right to rebellion in the face of tyranny and others are not. And I think this is why since October 7th, one of the immediate pushes from the West, from Western media people or from politicians, was to criminalize advocating any sort of support for people's inalienable right to resist tyranny and to condemn Hamas, right? Like anytime people, we still see this to this day, right? Like, or if it's not asking someone who is on a WhatsApp messaging with a BBC reporter, if it's not, do you have any sort of connection to Hamas? It's, do you condemn Hamas? Do you, the whole thing about Mandami and globalize the Intifada madness all has to do with that only certain groups of people, past and present, have been allowed to practice what is supposed to be a universal right. And this is like a right, an idea that goes back even into that backwater that is medieval Spain. Well, I shouldn't say that. People might. Sorry, I don't want to insult our Spanish listeners, because they're in that sense they were like way ahead of the game. In the absence of like a sovereign, a legitimate sovereign, people have the right to resist. Like it's into the Declaration of Independence. I love assigning to my students Fidel Castro's famous courtroom speech that where he ends with "History will absolve you," because he goes through the entire lineage. He says what we did against the dictator Batista was legitimate for these reasons. This is our vision for a post-Batista Cuba, but fundamentally this is based on people's natural right to rebellion in the face of tyranny. And these Western monsters have criminalized that, right? Or have pushed people out of jobs or have kicked them out of school simply for articulating that idea. Now, what they say is, well, you're supporting terrorism, right? It's pure racism. And this is one of the things I think you guys are right, Sina, and thank you for, I'll echo Nora, and thank you for bringing us back to this because, and I couldn't, like, I'm sorry, I'm stupid. When I hear nihilism, I think of Big Lebowski. So when you were talking, you lost me completely, Sina. But, like as someone who has dabbled in researching and writing about like armed resistance and guerrilla movements, like what, objectively speaking, like as someone who researches this stuff, like what the Palestinian liberation movement has managed to do is unprecedented historically. Like you said, Sina, they are in an enclosed space. There are no mountains. There are no porous borders where allies can sneak in weapons. And they're facing an enemy that has every single advantage. And not just that, right? They had surveillance control over this region, over Gaza, for more than a decade, right? To the point where they can count how the individual caloric intake of Palestinians and then actually enforce that. Which is one of the things that drives me nuts. Like I can't, like what we're witnessing now is horrific and unprecedented. And then to think that they were already doing this in a slower, more drawn out process before October 2023 is just, I don't know how to handle that. They have unlimited financial pipeline from the United States and the West, unlimited arms pipeline from the United States. They have diplomatic cover from the United States and the West. And the reason why they are genociding the people of Gaza is because they cannot defeat guys running around in sandals, dropping bombs inside open personnel armored carriers. And they're doing this on their own. Like it's not there. There's no porous mountain borders where their allies can like sneak in weapons. And I think this is exactly right. And I think this is one of the things we have to keep pushing in our media sphere is that there are reasons for this genocide. There's reasons for this mass starvation campaigns. And it's fundamentally based on the fact that this supposed invincible, most moral army in the world cannot break this constellation of resistance fighters in Gaza, in a place that they have, that the Israelis have had three-dimensional control. Well, not three-dimensional because they can't get to the tunnels, right? But surface and aerial and digital, they have all that stuff under control, and they still can't win. And this is why they're attacking again. They're not. You're not supposed to be doing this, right, under international law. But this is why they're genociding these people. So, and I've learned, I think Elmer also talks about this as well. I've learned a lot from Elmer, and this he's also constantly citing the historical unprecedented nature of this type of resistance.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought up John Elmer because, I was thinking about the structure of what you do at Electronic Intifada and like the important. I was talking to somebody about this actually today that follows Palestine stuff and for some reason wasn't that plugged into what you all do. And I was like, he was talking about the problem of the suffering as like the way that we that we're understanding what's going on in Gaza. And so he was talking about the same thing that we're all talking about in terms of like the fact that liberals can identify with the suffering, but they can't put themselves in the place of supporting the resistance, right? And like Elmer, the resistance report is such an important aspect of covering Palestine. And, similar shout out to Justin and the work he does at Anti-Emperor Empire Project. Um, we have an emperor too, I feel like. But anyway, it's really critical, and it's actually the thing too that I notice in all the terms of service of these platforms that we're on are they're trying to get rid of is the ability to talk about armed resistance. Um, and so Sina may lose his license here after this episode, perhaps, but they probably won't come for you first, Sina. Um, but uh, that point is really important, and I think that, it connects to what we were talking about, and actually, Sina, shout out to you because I don't usually think of you as the person who injects the revolutionary optimism back into the conversation. Usually, you're kind of on the doomer pessimism scale a little bit sometimes, so thank you for that. But, um but the point you raise is absolutely essential, and I think it's connected to you're right to point out that the asteroid or the thing that I've fallen aback on a number of times, which is like falling into sort of this Christian eschatology or whatever, where I like want God to actually smite the Zionists, like which actually connects in with like weird Christian Zionism shit too, you know. But this idea, right, that like you need a Deus ex machina, you need somebody to come in, and it also connects to something interesting, which is I think how why we're conditioned like this, which does connect, I think, to why people are acting less in the West, which is like we grew up watching stuff like Superman. We grew up with these ideas that like there's some magical superhero, the Avengers for younger folks, right? Like that's gonna come in and take the evil out when it gets too out of pocket, right? Like, okay, when the nation states are not willing to do it, that some Martian will come in with superpowers and restore order. And people, it's interesting, like people have been putting this onto the new Superman, which I didn't realize. Like I knew there was like the weird immigrant discourse with the new Superman that people were talking about, which I was like, okay, well, liberals, like, they have their that's fine. But the the I didn't realize people were going to the point of like there's a Palestine connection to what's going on in Superman. And shout out to Samantha Sketches on Instagram. She put out like this really thorough debunk of this idea, which is like really good if people haven't seen it. Um, but like Superman is US imperialism. Like that's who he is. Like it's not, some idea that that somehow this is that him intervening in some conflict, which I is supposed to be Eastern Europe. I think it's much more likely that it's kind of a Russia Ukraine sort of parallel than anything to do with Palestine. But this idea that he's going to intervene and save, like, and then people are like giving money to this movie as like, hey, it's supportive of Palestine, so we should support it. It's ridiculous. And anyway, my little boy is here trying to get my attention for a second, so I'll pass it on. But yeah, I just think that like it again, like we want, you're gonna uh this idea, people want this superhero, right, to come in, and the real heroes are the folks. There are real heroes in Palestine, right? There are so many of them, and there are heroes in Yemen and heroes in Lebanon and in Iran, right? But the question still is like, where are ours? And I think it's because we're so conditioned to look for someone else to do it for us, and we haven't been properly working together to say like, we are the people that there's no one else, right? It is going to be us and others, like, so anyway.
Yeah, I think that's incredibly insightful. That it is, yeah, exactly. Like we're always like looking for crumbs, I think, especially in pop culture and corporate media. Like people get so excited when, CNN finally talks about, this private US mercenary slaughter foundation. Oh my God, they're finally, and like, people even say, they're like sending emails of gratitude to to CNN higher ups. I'm like, that's so servile. I don't know. It's just, they don't, they helped launder this. They are still helping launder this. And so we're, now we're supposed to go and see Superman, which, yeah, as you said, is a stand-in for US imperialism, like another way to kind of like, wrap people in the flag without even knowing it. And because, it may have some sort of like parallel, story construction that could be, you know, compared to Palestine. Like it's not even explicit. It's like, yeah, exactly. Like I don't know. That's pathetic. And yeah, it kind of reifies this like, well, if I go see Superman, then that's I'm doing something for the Palestinian cause. Um, I'm sure the same people are like also the ones who are reading Chris Hedges and agreeing with his hypothesis that Gaza is over, that the enemy has won. I think there's a through line in that. Um, and yeah, we can't like. What if the Palestinian resistance is the Superman in this equation? Like, why are we looking for, a Keir Starmer or Steve Witkoff or whatever to be the one to come in and swoop in and save Palestinians? And that's not to say that I still think there needs to be 1,000, 10,000, boats going to Gaza. There needs to be millions of people, like running the siege on Gaza. There needs to be more. Anything, just doing anything. But this whole, yeah, this like kind of like search for a savior thing coming from the West that's not it. That's not it, because the saviors are coming from underneath the rubble. The saviors are the ones, bringing water to children in the Rafat al-Arir camp, that's being run by the Samir Project. The saviors are the ones still holding like classes for children in some of these displacement camps. Like that's it. And so how do we kind of reframe like, how we interact with that paradigm, I think is incredibly important. And and while continuing to support in any way we can with whatever money we have available, these mutual aid projects or these individual family, fundraisers. That's incredibly important. And how do we imagine bigger? I think, yeah, there's so much. I don't know. It's overwhelming, but I think it's really necessary to keep trying to like flesh this all out.
I think it's important, Nora, that you highlight, and you guys, to echo what Jay said, the way you guys structure EI is that you guys really show that resistance comes in myriad forms, right? So it's not just about glorifying or idealizing like armed resistance, but there is no armed resistance without the other type of resistance that you always highlight at the beginning of the show. Essentially, that's actually the true power, right? And like guerrilla war theory, revolutionary theorists would say that, right? Like that's where the power comes from. I think what's interesting also is that we had an interesting contrast in the last 2 years, right? Where you had the same people who are calling these resistance fighters, defined broadly in Gaza, terrorists, are also the ones like supporting Ukraine. And to me, like that contrast is really interesting, right? And this kind of falls in like what you guys were saying about Superman. I took my kids to watch Superman just so we could like be in an AC and I can like just chill for a little bit and not have to like entertain kids. But it is really odd that people read, having watched it, it is really odd the way that people were reading stuff. I think it shows that the masses in the US at least are hungry. And this is, I think media work is really important, right? I think one of the things that every successful revolutionary movement has been really good in using the media of their time, whether it was like the Haitian revolutionaries with newspaper and with like circulating stories and rumors that like sailors would take around the Caribbean, to different Latin American movements that use like their own rebel radio stations to communicate their messages. Like I think what these national liberation fighters in Gaza have been really expert in using media to highlight what they're doing. And I may be totally wrong, and I think I've aired this idea to you guys before, but I swear the red triangle, they got it from FIFA, the video game, which is like such a globally recognized video game because it's a football game, like the best sport in the world and the most followed sport in the world. And if you've ever played that game, you know that those red triangles indicate certain things, right? So I really want to be right on this, but I think their way
No,
of
you are
using
right.
media.
Yeah, my kid plays FIFA 25, and yeah, I'm always.
I have
look.
obviously do not play FIFA anymore at all with my kids, but
It
their
was
media
the
work has been
Yemeni
really-
channels. I think there was a Yemeni channel that popularized it. I think it's like something
Okay.
Al Alam Al Harbiya, something like that. It's like you would always see their they had a very effective watermark that you remembered, at least I did, all those years. But those red triangle videos, I have to say something, this is interesting, is that those red triangle videos from Yemen were only shared in like resistoid Shia circles. Because until now, like the West wasn't exposed to like Yemeni resistance. It was only a recently thing. And what's interesting is that the story of all these various resistances, like a lot of it has been deeply religious, right? That like religious believing people who don't need inspiration because they believe already and they give up.
They have ideology, Sina.
Yes, they have ideology, and it's not. But because it's like something that's indigenous to their life world, and something that's been around, that their traditions have been around for like by now over 1,000 years, at least in the Islamic aspect of it. And obviously there is like a pre-Islamic aspect to Yemeni identity too, which congeals because Yemen isn't a fake country like the certain little Polish playground in the Eastern Mediterranean that we know about called Isn't Real. So like that. Like, I know this sounds very humanist, but like the roots of a culture and the roots of a people matter in a fight like this. And since Zionists have no roots, or at least they do have roots, but those roots are in Europe and they're marinating in borscht and not falafel, despite what they think. Like, it's not like that foreignness is what drives them out at the drop of a hat, that they can't sustain like life in the conditions that they're facing, where they're isolated, where they're alone. Oh my God, you did this again. You brought Kassam. He's so big. Now you threw me off track. We have to end the episode. I'm not even going to finish
He's a
what I was
big boy.
saying. But
Sorry.
that
He was
Yemen,
begging
but
to come sit on my lap.
he's a sweet boy. Look at him go. That that's the thing in that story of Yemen, and they too faced a genocide. Like the starving babies of Yemen were very, very common images, but it wasn't shown. And I'm not like trying to be like the hipster guy here, being like, I was watching starving babies before, but like that's not what I'm saying, obviously. But it's in the sense that the technology of using starvation as a weapon has preceded this battle. It's more the fact that we probably have never seen one side revel in it so openly and blatantly and openly stated that it is a more that it, like that like you know Saudi war, like there wasn't Saudis, it was those are all Western military rooms, but like the Western military rooms designing the war on Yemen launched a genocidal war. It just wasn't called a genocide the way that Zionists like they're like they have like the, you know, in boxing matches they have that woman who comes out and parades the ring around, like that's them holding up a placard being like, we're doing genocide, stop us, go ahead and stop us. Like they love showing it, which is what makes this such a mind fuck, that it's like, oh, and then when they turn around and tell us that, oh, you're the evil one for calling us anything, that like it actually, it's a strategy that works because it's such like a brazen, like upside down kind of thing. And I've thought about this a lot of like, and one reason why we're subjected to so much Zionist ideology and why we spend so much time fighting back against it is that unlike Yemenis, unlike Iranians, well, most Iranians, there are some Zionist Iranians, unfortunately, but unlike a lot of other peoples, they're not subject to the Western, like Zionist imperialist media machine that like rains down like legitimacy and like centrality of this stupid ethno-state like all day long. And that's one of its first victims of their own genocide has been their like hilarious farce of being this only democracy and blah, 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 and all that bullshit. When they themselves say it, they're like, oh, it's fine. Fascism's okay. We're fascist. That's good. You know, like that's my feeling at all of this is that like this has been, by bringing out their worst elements, is that it brings them to make mistakes, strategic, historic, military, that it costs them in ways they don't see because they're blinded by so much rage and war lust and a feeling of drunken like a dominance over their enemies, that they're missing like the forest through the trees of their own decline. And the fact that they can't have ships deliver them their precious goods because all they have is capitalism. This is something that, you know, this is something that we can't calculate for. And who's enforcing this principally is Yemen, the poorest country in the world. So like, I you know, you have to not, like Chris Hedges, if you're hearing this, cut it out, buddy, because the images from Gaza, from Lebanon are designed to make you feel like you're defeated. They're designed to tell, and it's not, and you're the secondary audience. You're like the tertiary audience, really. It's primarily for Palestinians, which is why they had that poster up. There's no future in Palestine, right? Like they had that poster up, and like that's because their first and foremost victory is psychological against the Palestinians. It can't be military. It has to be psychological. So all of these things they're doing is working towards a psychological victory where they say, okay, yeah, there is no future in Palestine. And based upon what I've seen, based upon my experience, you know, like being part of this struggle, like in the deep, deep farthest reaches of Canada and watching people argue this and being comrades with Palestinians, like that's never going to happen. Palestinians will never give up their land. And the fact that like my friend Mohammed, his family, they just are so steadfast, connected to that land. It's like what would you do? Like, what would you do in that situation? Would you run? I would run. I know I would. I would 100% run. Like, I'm not afraid or embarrassed to admit that. I would take all my stuff and go to like what I perceived was the safest place. And Palestinians just, they stay. They like hold their land. And like in that way, I think about it a lot. Like I put myself in their shoes and I say like, what would I do if I was like just walking with my dog and then they bombed around us, or if they like bombed my entire house and I was in the basement at the time and I survived, like where would I go? You know, like that's, I think about that a lot. And I don't have like a fraction of the steadfastness that Palestinians do. But of course, I'm a freaking Westoid. I was raised in the West, and this is the nature of our society. Is that it's not built for these kind of calamities. You're not built for like endurance. You're built to consume as much as possible and then perish as quickly as possible and cheaply as possible, so they can replace you. So yeah, Jay, did you have a follow up? Sorry, I interrupted you.
Yeah, I mean, no, 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 you're fine. I mean, it connects to what you're talking about too, and I think your point on, Tufan al-Aqsa and like the success of it in all of the things that it exposed is apt. And I mean, I actually really appreciate the point because I've been trying to wrestle with this quite a bit. That that we have seen starvation of people, that getting having Yemenis in my DMs asking me to share their campaigns goes back further than having Palestinians, right? And then folks in Congo, like folks in Sudan. So it isn't new in that respect, but it feels new, right? And so what is it that makes it feel new? And I think you're right, Sina. It's the gloating. It's the fact that you have Zionists taking their family to the entry points into Gaza to stand in front of trucks, right? To rally with flags against baby formula getting into the Gaza Strip. Like that that exposes what things like sanctions, right, or blockades, when we think about Cuba or Venezuela or Yemen, right, what these are all about, or sanctions on Iran, right, like the goal, or Iraq, right, that the that we don't often get. Like you get Madeleine Albright, right, saying that like the cost of 500,000 Iraqi children or whatever was like an acceptable cost. You get those kinds of sound bites every once in a while from Empire, but you don't get the kind of mass images of people celebrating a Holocaust like scenario, like cheering it on. You're not used to seeing that, right? Because within the West, usually you don't have to do that, right? If you sanction a country, nobody really even bothers to pay attention to what that means most of the time, right? um Unfortunately. And so I hope that as we move also out of this, that we can also make that connection for people more and more too, that like the sanctions on, the blockade on Cuba needs to stop, that the blockade, that all of, that all Western sanctions are essentially this exact same thing. This is just a extreme example where you see the fascists like cheering it on in a way that you don't normally. Um, the other thing I wanted to say before I did get a little distracted the last time I was talking, to kind of connect a couple of the things that I said. So the importance of the resistance report and media like that is that folks actually don't see that. Like we all see that stuff, right? Because we're watching on Telegram, or we follow certain accounts on Twitter, or but that media is highly suppressed in the West. So the assumptions, I mean, I know I've run into people who are pro Palestine that haven't seen those videos and are only seeing the videos of suffering because they've never had somebody show them like, oh, go to this channel and see what's going on over there, or follow Electronic Intifada, right? Like they they just don't know enough about it, right, to know exactly, which I mean does raise the question of how pro Palestine are they actually, right? But it does but it's true that they are people who care, and who cared like 2 years ago, right? So it wasn't like they just came into it. But that is like the thing about these social media echo chambers, is that we can think that everybody is seeing the video of these guys in sandals and tracksuits resisting tanks, and that they would of course identify with that person. And they probably would, but a lot of people aren't seeing that. And that's why they don't show that stuff on, CBS News or CNN. It's why they make y'all at Electronic Intifada like edit your videos so that you don't see certain elements of it too, because they just they don't want people to fully grapple with that and to identify with those folks as the people who they should be supporting. And obviously that dovetails with everything else, with the Islamophobia, with the war on terror, with all of that stuff. But it really is important. Like, I have a friend who organizes locally here in Philly, and he was talking about, he does like tenant organizing and this kind of stuff. And he was talking about showing people resistance videos and this like changing their consciousness or their understanding of what's going on in Gaza. And I think, and also then imagining themselves in their own struggle of like, I could be more militant in what we're fighting for here, and I think that that's what they don't want. So I just wanted to mention that in terms of the importance of that kind of work, because I really think it is. The challenge is like getting that online echo chamber also out of that space and into spaces with people like that who aren't going to get it because they're not watching my YouTube show or yours or whatever else.
I love the idea of like having a community watch party of like John's resistance report, or just like the latest in the from the Telegram channels. Um,
Yeah, didn't Yemen put on the Jumbotron at one point, like the PAL action documentary, right? Like
yes.
that kind
Yeah.
we need that.
Yeah.
We need
Yeah.
like arts in the park. We're gonna watch the resistance report on the 20-foot screen.
Oh my God. John would be thrilled. I love that. Yeah, I mean, we have to imagine bigger. We have to um I don't know. We just have to be we have to kind of double down on our militancy and our, public um support of indigenous resistance. We should make it normalized. I think that's a pretty simple ask.
That's a great way to end it. Thank you, guys. Thank you, Nora. Thank you, Alex. Thank you, Jay.
Thanks, comrades.
Thank you, guys.
We'll try to be back
Yeah,
soon.
thank you.
Cheers,
Thank
guys.
you. Sina, can we shout out like
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
yeah.
Of course.
So I mean, obviously we want to shout out the Samir project. Give me a sec. I want to pull up this other project that some folks have done that is really, let me see if I can grab it. So a software developer, see, and I'm going to put this in the chat.
Oh, from that.
So some folks will know.
Oh,
I think
yes.
I know what you're talking about. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. So some folks know Layla. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Some folks know Layla on Twitter. But like she and then a software developer, what they did is they created basically an algorithm and a database for GoFundMe's and Chuffed accounts for Palestinians. It's people that folks have been supporting for, usually months, if not years at this point. And what it does is the ones that you see at the top are the ones who have gotten the least amount of support over the last like week or so, right? And so it just allows you to see folks in Gaza that are not receiving aid. And then it also usually connects to the Twitter account of those folks, as well as either the Chuffed campaign or the GoFundMe. So you can actually connect with them as well, right? And you know, they're working through it. They're still like kind of adding stuff to it and
It's great.
working out glitches and have plans for it. But I just think it's a great project because there are, like, I always get people, in my DMs that are like, we haven't eaten in a week. And this kind of gives you the ability to see, because folks need like hundreds of dollars usually just to get anything at this point. And So if you see that somebody's gotten like $15 in the last week, you can bet that that family probably has not eaten in a week, right? And so um, obviously it is like total triage, but in another thing, it's like it is another form of resistance that people are doing to try to just help out these families. And in addition, I think to supporting organized efforts like Samir Project, which I do think is really critical. I think that project like this is a great way to kind of try to put a highlight on families, because also a lot of times the people who ask the most may not be the people who actually need it the most, and this gives some way to, it's not going to be perfect, right? But at least it gives some way that people can look at that a little bit differently and see, oh, like I'm going to boost this campaign today, just because I can see that they need some help. So.
It's fantastic. Yeah. And all of those accounts have been like vetted and verified and all of that.
I'll put a link to that.
It's great.
in
Thank
the
you.
episode. Thanks for bringing that up.
Yeah.
Okay, guys, I'm gonna press end.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
All right. Thank you.